Welcome back, guys. We got a different one for you today. I have a board from a good friend of mine that needs some love. Well, he needs some love, but the board needs some love. So he's got a few repairs that he needs to make on this thing. So we're gonna start off. I'm gonna kind of walk through everything and show my method of repairs. Might not be everybody's, but it's my method and it seems to work pretty good. I'm gonna go over this whole board entirely, find all the dings, all the divots, all the breaks, all the cracks, anything. We're gonna get this all fixed up for him. It's a special board to him. He's a special dude. Matter of fact, there's his channel right there, Chill Adventures. Go out there, subscribe to him. He's a great guy. We're gonna get this board all fixed up and ready to rip. All right, let's go. So the first thing I do in any of these situations is I wanna just get a real good visual on the board. And really to do that first, I wanna get this thing scrubbed absolutely perfectly clean. This GoPro mount is giving me a bit of a headache, but I'm just using small cordage and I'm trying to cut underneath it to get that foam sticker off there. So the only reason I'm pulling that off is I want to take a look underneath it. I want to scrub everything clean like I said, but I want to make sure, absolutely make sure that everything is in pristine condition. But that GoPro mount needs to be replaced. It's got some things glued together, so I'm gonna go ahead and replace that for him once we're all said and done. But for right now, I need to get it off there. Okay, so I've got the GoPro mount off there. I've still got some work to do to get that foam sticky stuff off. But just taking a look at this board, it's actually in really, really good shape. There's just some dings here and there. But the biggest area that needs to see some attention here is this back here. So what has happened is this leash cord is too long, and basically after a few attempts of repair, we're still getting this edge busted off here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna cut all of this off. Yep, I think we're good there. Let me roll it over. Looking at the bottom, looks like we've just got some spots here on some recent repairs, just need to be sanded down. I did notice this spot here is a little bit soft. Maybe it had some water intrusion at some point. I don't think it's gonna be too big of a deal, but maybe that one there I might dig into once I'm all said and done. This nose up here, this guy, looks like it's got a bit of an air pocket in it. I'm gonna grind that out and fill that with some Q-Cell. Sanding there, maybe a little divot there. Like I said, here's the bottom of this back area. The glass is just torn. So I'm gonna cut all this off and redo the foam underneath there with some Q-Cell. All right, here we go. So another thing I just noticed is traction pad on the back. It's in pretty good shape, but it's a little bit loose in the middle. So once I get all this said and done, I'm gonna get some adhesive underneath that to stick that thing back down. All right, so I've got it cleaned up for the most part. I'm gonna start sanding on some of this just lightly to see what it exposes. And then once I get to that point, I'm gonna just use painter's tape and I'm gonna start marking off every spot that I see that needs special attention. Simple as that. Just mark it off. Start your job. Planning is the most important step in all of this. So I'm just using a Scotch-Brite pad and loosely, lightly going over the whole board. Kind of gets rid of any residue, wax buildup that the degreaser didn't get. But on top of that, it allows me to really feel the board, and I'll see or catch little imperfections. Obviously there's some dings and dents in here, pressure dings. That's not a problem. It's when we're breaking the surface of the fiberglass that it becomes an issue. That allows the water to get in. So really, he's done a good job of fixing a lot of these repairs. Up in the nose, they're all watertight. They just need a good sanding to smooth them out to the rest of the board. I'm gonna really be focusing on the back end of this board where that leash really tore into the tail of this thing. So let me finish up getting this all handled, and then I'm gonna start digging away at the tail. So like I said, this is the biggest issue with the board right now. And I know it might seem scary to some people, but sometimes you just gotta get right in there and get the junk out. Foam underneath here is in actually really, really good shape. So it just really needs some extra glass put on here, a sheet of glass, some resin, I'm gonna get this peeled off to where it doesn't want to peel any further. A little score with the razor knife. All right, and we are good on the bottom. Same thing on the top. After a few attempts here with some resin, things were just not sticking. Get some of this cut off. And I think this might require the big guns. All right, let me bust out the sander. I'm gonna hit this spot, and I'm gonna hit any of the other spots that he's already made some repairs to. Looks like we need some glass back here too. Hit every other spot on this, and then that'll expose anything that may need to be filled. Got this little hole right here that I gotta do something about. I got it all sanded down. I've got some areas that I need to pay attention to. So I'm gonna wipe this all down with alcohol after I've got it all sanded down and everything, and let it sit overnight, and we'll be back tomorrow. Okay, so we've got it all cleaned up. It's dried overnight with the alcohol, and the reason for doing that is just to make sure that I have zero wax or any residue left on the board. I've got things marked off like this, little dings that I've got to repair here and there. The biggest one back here on this tail, I've got the exposed foam that I'll get into. And what I'm gonna do right now is all these little divots. I'm gonna use my Dremel and start digging in to get the foam exposed, and then I will fill that with Q-Cell, the resin filler. Let's go. All right, so I've got all this stuff ground out of there. Everything's exposed. I'm gonna use some real coarse sandpaper to kind of get in there a little bit, clean everything back up even more, and then give something for the Q-Cell and resin to bite to. This is that spot on the tail I was talking about. So I've got this all nice and exposed. I'm just gonna hit the sandpaper on this fiberglass here, up in here, and basically make sure it's not so smooth so the resin has something to stick to. All right, everything is sanded, scuffed up around the holes that I'm gonna eventually fill with Q-Cell and resin. Now I just need to use the vacuum real quick to get every last bit of dust off this, and then I'm gonna do one last wipe down with alcohol, let it sit overnight again, and then we'll be back. So much like I've got this taped off, basically it creates a dam for the resin and Q-Cell to fill in there. I'm gonna do the same thing over here. Basically, just some painter's tape, simple stuff. We're just gonna get this, and basically it's gonna stop any of the excess from flowing away. That's all we're going for. It's just so we don't make an absolute mess on these rails. Simple as that. So some of the resin and stuff we're gonna be using today, I've got the Ding All sanding resin. This is a laminating type resin. And then we have Q-Cell filler. basically what it does is it makes the resin lighter weight so that when you're filling that in, it's not so dense. And what it dries into is essentially almost like a hard marshmallow. So we're gonna go ahead and mix that stuff up. Just pay attention to your directions on how much of the activator you need for the temperature that you've got outside. So with anything, try to start off small. I've got 1 ounce of the resin here without activator, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pour that into my mixing bowl first. Then I'm gonna add some of the Q-cell filler until I get it to the consistency that I want before I add the hardener, because once you add the hardener, your time is limited and you have to start mixing, and do that for just a few minutes until it's all activated, and then all systems are go. Pour this resin in my mixing bowl. Obviously for a larger job, you're gonna mix much more of this, but this should be adequate. I'm gonna focus on the first 2 or 3 real deep gouges in this board before I get into some of the other stuff. Couple scoops of the filler here. I'm gonna mix this up until it gets somewhat of the consistency that I want. I'm going for a marshmallow fluff type of deal. That's pretty good. So 2 big heaping spoonfuls of that. All right. To add my drops of activator in. Like I said, you want to mix this stuff for a good solid, say 5 minutes. All right. Make sure once you get to this point, everything is prepped and ready to go. And then we're gonna get this right into the spots that we need to fill. Got this stuff all mixed up. Like I said, kind of a marshmallow consistency. Don't really worry about making a mess when you do this, because what's gonna happen, this stuff is very easily sanded. So we're just filling in the gaps. That's all we're doing. And that's, you see why I've got that tape like that, so it doesn't run off the side. And start working on all this stuff. So the reason I'm putting it back here is because we're missing just a bit of the board. And then basically once I get this all done and sand it off, and you'll see that, is that I am going to put a layer of fiberglass, if not 2, over this, just to make sure everything is nice and strong, and then we don't have to do this in the near future again. That will all sand off, and you'll see that. It won't stick to the tape. It's gonna flow all nice and smooth. All right, follow me over here. Some of these smaller divots that we've got, we're gonna get that stuff in there. It'll all flow out. I can already feel the resin starting to get a little bit extra tacky on me. This last spot here. So I think that's about it on the bottom. And we're just gonna let this sit up real long, probably the rest of the afternoon, so we don't have to worry about anything going wrong. And we'll see you back here for the other side. All right, so we've let this Q-cell dry. I've got these spots here that are all nice and filled. They're actually overfilled, which is perfect because then we are going to start sanding this down. I'm gonna take some of the excess off this tail with a razor knife first. Flip this board over. All right, like I was saying, when you dam this up with the tape, when you go ahead and peel it off, it actually comes off nice and cleanly and nothing sticks to that Q-cell. So you've got a ton of buildup. And then I'm gonna go ahead and start shaving this off. Just gonna work some of this excess off here just with a razor knife. You can do it with a sanding pad or just sandpaper with your hand. I'm just cutting down some of the time here that it's going to take to get through all this material, and all I'm doing is getting this back to its original contour, the shape of this tail. So after I did some of the power shaping, as it were, I used some 80 grit with my hand, kind of shaped this down, got the rough shape, everything. I'm back in the same profile as this other side. I'm gonna check it with a template. Now I'm gonna go back down to 220 grit. You can do probably 150 to 220, somewhere in there. We're gonna still keep it a bit rough so that the resin and the glass layer still has something to stick to. And then after I finish that up, I'm gonna start hitting all of these other little spots. I've got a spot just like that tail over there on the rail. Come on over here. It's gonna be the same situation as that tail where I've got a ton of built up resin. And yeah, that's where we're at. Smooth like it never happened. All right, work on the rest of these spots. Next step, after we let this sit for the night, is lay on some glass. All right, next step, that's it. So one of the things I was doing here was checking the contour. That, flip this. Damn near perfect match. We have all of these spots sanded down. Everything's filled in with resin. We are gonna focus on the spots that need some fiberglass put on. First spot, main spot that had the most amount of damage here is on this tail. We've got this all nice and shaped out right. The other spot is on the rail here. So let me fix up some resin, mix up some resin that is, and get some glass on this. I will be mixing up my sanding resin. So sanding resin's a little bit different, and it's the top coat. It's got a little bit of wax in the resin, and what it does is it seals it better, and then it allows you to sand it smoother. So I'm gonna mix that up, and when I apply the glass, I'll be applying it with a paintbrush. Get everything nice and smoothed out. We're not concerned about the edges of it because that'll all get sanded away, but over the bulk of it is what we're looking to do and get it all nice and smooth. We don't want any air pockets in there, and we want a good smooth finish. After that's all said and dry, we'll go ahead and go back, put another coat of resin on it, sand that smooth, and we should be golden. Before we get anything mixed up here, I want to get a piece of glass that is capable of covering all of this. Like I said, I'm not too concerned about having extra, but we want to make sure that we have a piece that's small enough to work with, that is big enough to cover the entire area. Everything's trimmed up. Our pieces of glass are ready. If anybody is wondering what all these little pieces of tape are, it's so that I have reference marks of the spots that I was putting Q-cell in, the spots that I have to glass, the spots that I need to still sand, all of that. And it just makes things work a lot smoother as you're going through this so you don't miss a spot. When I mix this resin up, I'm going to mix up probably about an ounce or two, not a whole lot. That should be enough to glass in these two spots, and if I have any extra while I've got that working time of the resin, I'm gonna go ahead and paint over some of these other spots just to avoid rework or remixing. I'm gonna wet the surface down. That's gonna give something for that glass to start sticking to. A nice thick coat of resin on it. That way it sands out nice and smooth. You want to make sure that all of the strands of the fiberglass are completely encased in that resin. Always swipe from the center outward to smooth that glass cloth and to get all the air bubbles out. It looks pretty good there. All right, now like I said, we're gonna jump around to some of these other spots. First layer of glass is on this. I'm gonna trim some of this extra off, sand it down, get everything smoothed back out, evaluate this corner again, and likely put I don't know if I'm gonna put another layer of glass on there or not. It's looking pretty smooth, but we definitely need some more resin. So let's get at it. All we're doing is getting this extra glass that was pulled up on the edges freed up. This is a good sanding. All right. All right, so now that we got this all smoothed out, first coat of resin and glass is done on this major repair that was on this back corner. I'm gonna do a first sanding, coarse sanding with like 80 grit on the rest of these spots and prepare everything for the next round. All right, everything is sanded down with 220 grit, I think. 120, getting all this dust off this. I will wipe it down with alcohol. I think at this point, everything looks good. The tail section looks really, really good. It's smoothed out really nice with that one layer of glass. This whole deck only has one layer of glass on it. It's a pretty thin deck, it's pretty light. So I'm gonna stick with that. I don't wanna add any extra weight to that back end. Touch up these last few spots that I was working on, and I'm gonna get some resin down the center of this stringer. Once this is sanded down a little bit, if you feel it with your hands, you can kind of feel where it's not as smooth and glossy as it once was. And that's where the resin's worn through, starting to get into the glass matting. So I'm gonna get some extra resin on that. We'll let that dry up, do the other side, same scenario. And then from there, it's just a final sand. And we're gonna step down from 220, 120 down to 220. And then I'll do a final sand once this is all done to get a nice sheen back on this board with 400, and I'll use it wet and do it by hand. We're almost there. Let that set for the night, and then we'll come back, do the other side, and like I said, we'll do the final sand and get all those little bumps out of there. And it's gonna be good as new, man. Last go around of resin is on. It's all nice and smooth. Everything is filled in. Stuff on the top. Feel no divots where these dings were. It is time for its final sand. I'm gonna start off combination of hand and power sanding depending on the thickness of the resin that I need to smooth out. We're gonna start off with 240 grit. from 240 grit, once I get that all knocked down, I'm gonna be moving to 400 grit. I'm gonna use a combination of dry sanding and wet sanding. When I'm spraying the water on while I'm sanding, it helps keep that sandpaper nice, free and clear of the resin powder that we're getting off there. We're gonna end up with a real nice, smooth satin finish. That's it, we're in the home stretch. Let's get at it. Just about the entire top of this board I've got nice and smooth with that 240 grit by hand. Like I said, use water with it. It keeps the sandpaper nice and clear and you get a better sanding action with it. I'm gonna flip this over, do the same thing on the bottom side, and then go over the entire board with 400. 400 is gonna be the final grit. If you were doing high gloss, you could go to a next step of a polishing compound or something like that, but 400 is going to be probably pretty nice and satin finish for this guy. We're almost there. I'm excited. This is going to turn out nice. The more time you take doing this, I can guarantee you the results are going to be that much better. Patience, patience, patience. 400 grit. Same process as before. We're gonna keep it nice and wetted. And we're just gonna lightly sand this entire board, get everything smoothed out. Light amount of pressure. We're just gonna get everything nice and evened out here. This is when things really start to smooth out and it feels nice and brand new again. Bottom side. Here we go. Final wipe down, we are done. We've got this thing all finished up. Gonna get the GoPro mount back on, get the leash cord back in the tail. Everything else is done. I'm gonna slap some wax on this so he's ready to rock as soon as I give it back to him. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful in some way or another. And from now on, maybe you can fix your own boards.